The 8 o'clock Mass, a short story by Raymond Elkin. The 8 o'clock Mass. She was there again, as she had been every morning, as though she were waiting for something or someone, without turning her head or saying a word or giving the impression that she was unconcerned. She scrutinized everyone who entered and who left the post office. The people who lived in the village were used to her and paid no attention to her. My wife and I had been on vacation for 3 weeks in this area of scattered villages and small towns on the French side of the mountains separating France from Spain. There were about 200 inhabitants in this village. That was the only one that had a post office. It was quaint, and in our mind, anything quaint is a village. In any event, it was small enough so that everyone in it knew everyone else, and we, the summer tourists, were the outsiders. When we asked about the woman we always saw standing in front of the post office every morning, everyone avoided the question. We finally learned that she waited for the mail every morning and then would go to the 8 o'clock Mass. My wife had said several times she would like to visit the church, and I suggested to her that we go to the 8 o'clock Mass. I was not interested in visiting a church, and even less interested in attending the Mass. It was this woman who intrigued me, and visiting the church was only a pretext to see her again. When we entered the church, I saw her in the first row of pews. She was on the far left of the church, and we had entered by the door on the right. A ray of sun outlined her profile. She stared directly toward the altar, as if she were trying to absorb everything she saw. Her staring was so intense, one could even imagine that she was trying to communicate something. In the dim lighting of the church, she was fascinating. One could see the curve of her tense and concentrated forehead. Her nose was not beautiful, but it was in perfect harmony with the rest of her face. One could not see the imperfections. One could not see the wrinkles around her eyes, nor her white and not so well-kept hair, nor her thin, pugnacious mouth that betrayed some inner aggressiveness and independence. I was almost embarrassed watching her, and I had that odd feeling as though I were an eavesdropper. She did not make friends with the people of the village. A simple good morning, a yes or a no, and the conversation stopped short. The imagination of those who lived in the village created all sorts of explanations, but as the years passed, their imagination became realities, and there were as many realities as there were imaginations. She took a trip every 3 months. She arranged for a taxi to come to the small house by the bridge to pick her up and drive her to Lourdes, some 20 kilometers away. At Lourdes, she was known to have taken the train to Toulouse, but after having taken the train, no one could say what had happened. She would come back to the village 2 days later, and she would always take a taxi from the train station in Lourdes. At first, the people in the village thought she went to Lourdes to see her family. Later, they said that she went to a bank to get some money. Finally, they said she went to see a doctor, some sort of specialist of the illness they imagined she must have had. She could always be seen in front of the post office waiting for the mail, doing her grocery shopping, or at the church. In order to be really sure to see her, one would have to attend the 8 o'clock Mass. She was always there, except when she went to Toulouse. She was the first to get to the church and the last to leave. Everyone thought she was odd, because she only listened to the sermon. She never sang when everyone sang. She never prayed when everyone prayed. She never asked the priest to confess her. She never spoke to anyone except to say that which was necessary. Even Father Dupont, the village priest, thought she was odd, but he was discreet, and after several vain attempts to speak to her, he gave up. He was an orphan and had been brought up in an orphanage, and he knew at an early age that people have their secret gardens that one should not try to violate. During one of her trips to Toulouse, her house was broken into, but nothing was stolen. There was a television set, some furniture of little value, and odds and ends equally of little value. Had the police been called in, they would have probably thought it was someone in the village looking for money who had broken in, but she did not call the police. 6 months later, during a trip to Toulouse, the river near her home flooded over, and not only the bridge was closed down to traffic, but the taxi bringing her from the train station in Lourdes could not get close to her house. She stayed 3 days at the hotel waiting for the river to get back to normal. Father Dupont fell ill, and he was admitted to the hospital at Lourdes. He was temporarily replaced by the priest of a nearby village. During the time that Father Dupont was ill, she would go to the church, but she would not enter. She would wait outside, and when the Mass was over, and when the priest from the neighboring village walked to where his car was parked, she walked nearer to him and spoke in a quiet voice. "How is Father Dupont?" she asked him, already having the feeling by the way he looked at her that he would not tell her. He replied that he did not know exactly, and he was going to ask the hospital for more information. In reality, Father Dupont was on his deathbed, but the temporary priest did not know her, and he did not want to tell her. Father Dupont, who had been the village priest for more than a quarter of a century, died the following Sunday morning, just 3 days before his 54th birthday. Everyone in the village attended the funeral. The priest from the neighboring village gave a mass and a sermon. The mayor of the village gave a speech. She was there. She was dressed in black, and no one saw the specks of tears on her cheeks. 3 days later, after the funeral, a taxi stopped before her house. She put her 2 suitcases in the trunk and left the village. 1 month later, a real estate agent in Lourdes sold her house. She never came back to the village and was completely forgotten by everyone except the priest from the neighboring village. He imagined all sorts of things that, of course, in time, became realities for him. The end. This short story was first written in French, and I then translated it to English. If you would like to read or hear another of my short stories and or have any comments to improve my videos, please just send me an email to elkinshortstories@yahoo.com. Bye.